Like operations on functions, composite functions combine functions in order to create a new one. In this case, we're given f of x equals 6x minus 11 and g of x equals x plus 5 divided by 2. We're asked to first find f of g of x, then we're asked to find g of f of 3, and finally we're asked to solve f of g of x equals 19. So let's remember first that if we were asked to solve for f of 3, what that means is we write our f function. We start with what's on the left-hand side. So we write our f of x function, but instead of writing x, we're going to replace it with this number, 3. We're going to replace it with what's inside these brackets. So f of 3 equals 6. Instead of writing x, I'll write 3 minus 11. We can solve that. 6 times 3 is 18, minus 11 is 7. We're going to apply the same principle when we're solving for f of g of x. So we start with what's on the left-hand side. It's like we're reading a word. We start with the left and work our way in. So f of x equals 6x minus 11. But we don't want f of x, we want f of g of x. So instead of replacing our x with a 3 like we did in this example, we're going to replace our x with the function g of x. So f of g of x equals 6 times, here's our first x, we're going to replace it with our function g of x, and we can write down what g of x is, which is x plus 5 divided by 2. And then we subtract our 11 from our f of x function. We can simplify this a bit. We'll end up with 6x plus 30 divided by 2 minus 11. And then we can simplify this even further. 6x divided by 2 is 3x. 30 divided by 2 is 15 minus 11, which will equal 3x plus 4. So f of g of x is 3x plus 4. Our next question asks us to find g of f of 3. So again, we're going to start with what we come to first. We come with what's on the outside, and that's our g function this time. So g of x equals x plus 5 divided by 2. We don't want g of x, we want g of f of 3. And the f is what we come to next. So now, instead of writing x in our g function, we'll write f of x. So g of f of x equals, instead of x, we'll write our f of x function, which is 6x minus 11 plus 5 over 2. And finally, we aren't looking for g of f of x, we're looking for g of f of 3, which means we now replace every x that we see with a 3. So this equals 6 times 3 minus 11 plus 5 divided by 2. We can simplify that. 6 times 3 is 18, minus 11 plus 5 over 2. 18 minus 11 is 7, plus 5 over 2, which will be 12 over 2, which will be 6. So g of f of 3 is 6. Finally, we're asked to solve f of g of x equals 19. So f of g of x equals 19. Well, we've already figured out what f of g of x is. We did that in our first case. F of g of x is 3x plus 4. So we can replace this with 3x plus 4. And now we use our algebra to solve. We can subtract 4 from both sides. We're left with 3x equals 15. If we divide each side by 3, we're left with x equals 5. So when f of g of x equals 19, x equals 5.